What does it mean to be summoned home after years of silence? To a place where your presence was once barely acknowledged. At 35, I, Sophia, had crafted a life of purpose and achievement in New York. 800 miles from the Seattle home I left behind. Yet, on a crisp October evening in 2023, a single phone call pierced the quiet of my Brooklyn apartment, stirring memories I thought I had buried. It was my cousin Rachel, her voice tentative, bearing an invitation that felt both foreign and fraught. My parents wished for me to join them for Christmas. Why now? After nearly a decade of estrangement. Did they seek my return? The question lingered, pulling me into a past I had long since outgrown, yet compelling me to consider what awaited me. My life in New York was one of deliberate construction. As a back-end developer for a cybersecurity firm, I engineered solutions for major banks and government contracts. My work integral to systems that safeguarded millions. I was not merely competent, I was indispensable, resolving complexities that confounded entire teams. My Brooklyn apartment, a sleek haven of exposed brick and hardwood floors, stood as a testament to my independence, purchased with the fruits of my labor. Yet, beyond the confines of my professional world, I existed in solitude where my family was concerned. Since 2016, our communication had ceased. A mutual silence born of years of neglect. My parents, absorbed by my brother Dylan's charisma, had rarely acknowledged my presence, let alone my potential. Rachel was the sole exception, the only family member who held my new number, a fragile thread connecting me to a past I had chosen to leave behind. The call came on a Wednesday night, to the city's hum, a distant backdrop, as I sat on my apartment's balcony, a glass of wine in hand. Rachel's words were soft, almost apologetic. Sophia, your parents are trying to reach you. They want you to come home for Christmas. I lowered myself onto the edge of my bed, the weight of her message settling like dust. Now I asked, my voice steady but laced with disbelief. After all these years, Rachel explained they had been asking around, their insistence suggesting a sincerity I struggled to trust. I ended the call and stared at the wall, the city's lights flickering beyond my window. For years, I had banished thoughts of my family, their absence, a relief rather than a loss. Yet now, memories surged unbidden, sharp and unyielding. My childhood in Seattle was a study in contrast, while Dylan, my elder brother, basked in the glow of parental adoration, his football triumphs and class president titles celebrated with fervor. I lingered in the shadows, the overlooked sibling. At 13, I sat in a psychologist's office, knees drawn to my chest, as Dr. Ellis delivered a verdict. My parents dismissed Sophia's struggles stem not from isolation, but from being ignored. My mother's scoff echoed in my mind, her claim of equal love for both children, a hollow refrain. Dylan received a car at 16, a gleaming symbol of their pride. I was given a thrift store sweater, its musty scent, a reminder of my place. Christmases were no different. Dylan's gifts sparkling under the tree while mine felt like afterthoughts, perfunctory and uninspired. Rachel's call disrupted the equilibrium I had built. Why did my parents seek me now? After years of indifference, were they driven by remorse? Or something less altruistic? The question gnawed at me, stirring a curiosity I could not quell. I had transformed in their absence, becoming a woman of substance and resolve. My achievements a quiet rebuke to their neglect. Yet the prospect of returning to Seattle, of confronting the family who had once diminished me, held an undeniable pull. As I gazed across Brooklyn's skyline, I resolved to face them not as the invisible girl they remembered, but as Sophia, the architect of her empire, ready to uncover the truth behind their summons. The echo of Rachel's call lingered as I contemplated returning to Seattle, a city that held not just my family but the crucible of my youth. In the quiet of my Brooklyn apartment, I was no longer the girl who had fled 800 miles to escape invisibility. My journey began in the shadowed corners of my childhood home, where I learned to navigate a world that seemed to reserve its light for others. It was in those early years, amid the clamor of familial neglect, that I discovered a refuge that would redefine my existence, the precise, unyielding logic of code. Growing up in Seattle's North End, our modest craftsman house was a stage for my brother Dylan's triumphs. His laughter filled the rooms. His accolades, varsity letters, debate trophies adorned the walls. I, by contrast, was a whisper in the household. My presence acknowledged only when convenient. Family dinners were a ritual of exclusion. Dylan's tales of gridiron glory or student council victories drew rapt attention, while my quiet observations were met with distracted nods. The disparity was starkest during holidays, when the living room brimmed with relatives who showered Dylan with praise. I sat on the periphery, clutching a book, my thoughts drowned by their chatter. It was not malice, perhaps, but indifference, a slow erosion of self-worth that left me yearning for a place where I could matter. At 14, a chance discovery altered my trajectory. A faded flyer on the high school bulletin board announced an introductory computer science club, meeting Thursdays in room 27. Drawn by curiosity, I attended, stepping into a world where logic reigned over charisma. The club was a haven of misfits, students with thick glasses and dog-eared programming manuals, united by a shared passion for creation. Under flickering fluorescent lights, we dismantled obsolete computers, their circuits, a puzzle we learned to solve. I was captivated by the elegance of code, its ability to transform abstract commands into tangible outcomes. My first program, a simple text-based adventure game crafted on a salvaged desktop, sparked a joy I had never known. For the first time, I felt not just seen, but capable. Our teacher, Mr. Delgado, became an unexpected mentor. A soft-spoken man with a penchant for vintage keyboards. He saw potential where others saw only awkwardness. One afternoon, as we debugged a finicky script, he paused to address me. "Sophia, your mind is a rare thing," he said, his eyes steady. "It sees patterns others miss. Don't let the world dim that." His words were a lifeline, anchoring me through the tumult of adolescence. The club became my sanctuary, a place where I traded algorithms with peers and pored over borrowed texts on Python and C++. By 16, I had built a rudimentary website for a local bookstore, earning my first paycheck and a flicker of pride that no family praise could rival. Home, however, remained a battleground of diminished expectations. During a Thanksgiving gathering, as relatives toasted Dylan's acceptance to an elite California university, my mother offered a tepid aside. "We're encouraging Sophia to find steady work," an uncle, emboldened by wine, quipped. "My warehouse needs packers, decent pay for a kid." The table erupted in laughter, my parents joining in, oblivious to the scholarship offer tucked in my backpack. I had applied to a prestigious tech program in New York, securing a full ride, tuition, housing, and a stipend through sheer determination. Their mockery only sharpened my resolve. I would leave Seattle, not as a failure, but as a young woman poised to forge her legacy. As I prepared to depart at 17, the weight of my decision settled heavily, packing my belongings into a single suitcase. I stood in my childhood bedroom, its peeling wallpaper, a testament to years of neglect. Dylan's room, by contrast, was a shrine to his achievements. Preserved even in his absence, my parents offered no farewell, their focus fixed on Dylan's impending semester. Yet, as I boarded a bus bound for New York, our 800 miles from the only home I had known. I felt not loss, but liberation. The computer science club had given me more than skills. It had given me a vision of what I could become. Seattle faded in the distance, but the spark of code burned brightly within me. A beacon guiding me toward a future I would build on my terms. The bus that carried me to 800 miles from Seattle to New York marked the beginning of a life I had dared to imagine in the dim glow of my high school computer lab. By October 2023, as I stood on the precipice of returning to my childhood home, I was no longer the tentative girl who had arrived in Manhattan with a single suitcase. New York had become my proving ground, a city where I forged a career of distinction and a community of kindred spirits. The summons to Seattle loomed. But first, I reflected on the empire I had built, a testament to resilience that my family could neither claim nor comprehend. My early years in New York were a crucible of ambition and adaptation. The scholarship that brought me to a premier tech program covered tuition and housing, but I supplemented it with part-time work as a barista, steaming milk in pre-dawn hours to afford textbooks. I thrived in the classroom, my aptitude for complex algorithms earning accolades from professors. By graduation, I had distinguished myself, finishing at the top of my cohort. A cybersecurity firm, renowned for securing Fortune 500 clients, offered me a position before my diploma was framed. I accepted, stepping into a role where my code protected billions in assets, a far cry from the thrift store sweaters of my youth. My career ascended swiftly. In 2023, I led a pivotal project, a multi-million-dollar integration for a global bank, streamlining its defenses against cyber threats. The endeavor demanded months of meticulous planning, late nights untangling code, and presentations to skeptical executives. When the system launched flawlessly, my firm rewarded me with a bonus of $150. A sum that felt surreal. A validation of my unseen labor. I invested it wisely, consulting a realtor who found a gem in Brooklyn's Fort Greene, a 1,800-square-foot brownstone condo with soaring ceilings, a chef's kitchen, and windows framing the neighborhood's leafy park. Closing the deal, I became a homeowner. Each key on the chain, a marker of my autonomy. Fort Greene was a revelation, its tree-lined streets and historic facades alive with artists, families, and entrepreneurs. My brownstone, with its polished oak floors and exposed brick walls, became a sanctuary. I furnished it deliberately mid-century chairs, a walnut bookshelf brimming with tech journals and novels, a record player spinning jazz on quiet evenings. The neighborhood's vibrancy seeped into my life. Morning runs past the farmer's market, coffee at a corner cafe where baristas knew my order, evenings at a jazz club where the saxophone's wail drowned out lingering doubts. This was home. It's not the faded Seattle house I had left, but a space I had earned. My chosen family anchored me. Lisa, a data scientist with a sharp wit, had been my confidant since graduate school, sharing midnight coding sessions and triumphs over intractable bugs. At my housewarming, we gathered on floor cushions amid unpacked boxes, the air rich with the scent of Thai takeout and Merlot. Friends, coders, designers, teachers filled the room, with their laughter, a counterpoint to the silence of my Seattle years. Lisa raised her glass, her voice steady, to Sophia, who built this life from resolve alone. We toasted. The clink of glasses, a quiet symphony of belonging. Later, as we sprawled on the rug, swapping stories of failed projects and hard-won victories, I felt a warmth my family had never offered. Yet, as the housewarming faded and Christmas approached, Rachel's call cast a shadow. I had not spoken to my parents or Dylan in years. Their absence, a choice I had made to protect my peace. Now, they beckoned. And I wondered what had prompted their outreach. Were they aware of my success? Or was this a perfunctory gesture? Another afterthought. I prepared for the journey with care. Selecting gifts, handcrafted scarves, a leather journal, each chosen to reflect thoughtfulness, not obligation. My firm granted me leave, and I reserved a rental car for the 6-hour drive from a nearby city to Seattle. The distance a reminder of how far I had come. Standing in my brownstone's kitchen, sunlight streaming through the windows, I traced the edge of a countertop, its cool marble grounding me. I was no longer the girl who had cowered under familial indifference. New York had taught me my worth, its relentless pace honing my skills, a diverse voice affirming my place. As I packed for Seattle, I resolved to face my family not as a supplicant, but as a woman who had turned solitude into strength. The road ahead was uncertain, but I carried with me the certainty of my achievements, a foundation no one could diminish. As I locked my Brooklyn brownstone and embarked on the journey to Seattle, the weight of my packed gifts and resolved intentions anchored me. The 6-hour drive from a nearby city, through mist-shrouded highways and evergreen expanses, and felt like a passage through time. In December 2023, I arrived at my childhood home in Seattle's North End. Its sagging porch and chipped paint, a stark contrast to the polished elegance of Fort Greene, the house stood as a relic, its overgrown shrubs and flickering porch light evoking a past I had outgrown. Yet, as I pressed the doorbell, my pulse quickened, betraying the composure I had cultivated over years of independence. The door creaked open, revealing my mother, her eyes widening in momentary surprise. "You made it," she said, her embrace brief and perfunctory, as if I were a guest rather than a daughter. Inside, the air carried the stale scent of neglected wood and faded potpourri, a sensory echo of my youth. The living room buzzed with relatives, their conversations halting as I entered. A cousin's murmur, "She's here," carried a note of disbelief, while another whispered about my tailored coat, mistaking its understated elegance for casual wear. I stood, suitcase in hand, an outsider in a space that once defined me. My brother Dylan emerged from the kitchen, his presence commanding as ever. "Everyone, meet Mia," he announced, gesturing to his pregnant wife, her smile radiant. "Our future child's on the way." The room erupted in congratulations, and I offered a polite nod, my words drowned by the clamor. Dylan's gaze flicked to me, a smirk curling his lips. "Still tinkering with computers, Sophia, or have you upgraded to fixing copiers?" Laughter rippled, sharp and familiar, as Mia chuckled softly. "I develop software," I replied evenly, my voice cutting through the mirth. The dismissal stung, but I held my ground, a skill honed in New York's unforgiving boardrooms. My mother, oblivious to the tension, gestured toward the staircase. "Dylan's using your old room for his projects, so the couch is yours." The arrangement was unsurprising, yet it underscored my marginal place. As I set my bag down, my Aunt Nora approached, her voice syrupy with condescension. "Your brother's launching a venture such ambition, and you're still coding." Her tone implied a lesser calling. As if my work were a quaint hobby, I nodded, sparing her the details of my multi-million-dollar projects. Later, my uncle sidled up, his breath heavy with eggnog. "My shop needs clerks, 15% an hour. Honest work," he offered, as if my career were a fiction. "I'm content," I said, deflecting with practiced courtesy. The evening unfolded as a tableau of exclusion, each interaction a reminder of my peripheral role. Dylan held court, regaling the family with tales of his impending business, while I faded into the background, my contributions unacknowledged. Yet, beneath my calm exterior, I had come not to seek approval, but to confront the dynamics that had once diminished me. As I arranged my gifts, a cashmere throw, a carved wooden box beneath the Christmas tree, I prepared for the days ahead. Seattle's chill seeped through the walls, but I carried the warmth of my New York life. A quiet strength that would soon challenge the family's assumptions about who I had become. The chill of my family's Seattle home, with its threadbare warmth, could not dim the resolve I had carried from Brooklyn. Christmas Eve, 2023 unfolded as a test of endurance. The living room's clamor, a prelude to the dinner where old wounds would surface. As I arranged my carefully chosen gifts beneath the tree, I steeled myself for the gathering, aware that my presence was tolerated rather than celebrated. The dining room, with its chipped oak table and mismatched chairs, became the stage for a reckoning, where the family's disregard would collide with the truth of my accomplishments. Dinner commenced with Dylan at the helm, his voice booming as he unveiled his latest ambition, a tech startup poised, he claimed, to revolutionize e-commerce. We need $200. Zero to launch. I declared, his confidence unshaken by the vagueness of his plan. My father leaned forward, eyes alight with pride, while my mother nodded, her hand resting on Dylan's arm. We'll find a way, she assured. As relatives murmured their support, I sat at the table's far end, near the kitchen door, my plate dwarfed by the sprawl of holiday dishes. My contributions, a quiet question about market viability, were brushed aside. Dylan's laughter dismissing my expertise as irrelevant. The family's focus remained fixed on him. My presence, a mere footnote. As dessert was served, the gift exchange began, a ritual that exposed the depth of their neglect. Dylan and Mia unwrapped my offerings, a hand-stitched quilt, a sterling silver pen eliciting perfunctory thanks before they turned to their pile of lavish presents. My parents received a carved jewelry box from me, their smiles fleeting. When the moment came for my gift, a whoosh fell. My mother's face contorted in exaggerated dismay. We forgot yours, she said, her tone almost theatrical. Dylan's laughter erupted, sharp and unrestrained. Same old story, he jeered. Don't sulk, you're not a kid anymore. The table joined in, their mirth a blade honed by years of indifference. Something within me shifted, not anger, but a crystalline clarity. I reached into my purse, my fingers closing around a brushed steel keychain. I'm not sulking, I said, my voice steady. Rising above the din, I held the keys aloft, their gleam catching the candlelight. I bought myself a gift this year. My mother's brow furrowed. What's that? She asked. Keys, I replied, to my Brooklyn brownstone. I closed on it last month. Silence descended, heavy and abrupt, as if the room had lost its air. My father blinked, disoriented. You bought a house? He stammered. With what? With my earnings, I said, my tone measured. My firm licensed a cybersecurity framework I designed to a major bank. My bonus was $150. Null after taxes. The words landed like a thunderclap. Dylan's jaw slackened. Mia's eyes widened, and my parents exchanged a glance of stunned disbelief. Ibawusher. Zero, my mother echoed, her voice pitching upward. What kind of job pays that? I met her gaze. I develop enterprise security systems for Fortune 500 clients. My salary has been 6 figures for years. The table remained frozen, the weight of my revelation reshaping their assumptions. The mood shifted with dizzying speed. My mother rose, her smile sudden and saccharine. Why didn't you tell us? Sweetheart, we're so proud. My father chimed in, his voice eager. Dylan, your sister works with top companies. Dylan's expression hardened, his wife whispering urgently in his ear. My aunt, sensing opportunity, leaned closer, That brownstone, how many bedrooms, too? I replied. In Fort Greene. Near my office. My mother's eyes gleamed. We must visit. Family stays close. The hypocrisy was palpable. Their warmth, a thinly veiled calculation. As the evening wound down, my father approached, his tone deliberate. Before you go, we should discuss Dylan's venture. That $200. Zero. It's a ground floor opportunity. With your income, it's negligible. Right. The audacity of their request, after years of dismissal, crystallized my purpose. I had come to Seattle not to reconcile, but to lay bare the truth of my worth. As I retired to the couch, my makeshift bed, I knew the next day would demand a final stand, one that would sever the ties that had long bound me to their expectations. The chill of my family's Seattle home, with its threadbare warmth, could not dim the resolve I had carried from Brooklyn. Christmas Eve, 2023 unfolded as a test of endurance. The living room's clamor, a prelude to the dinner where old wounds would surface. As I arranged my carefully chosen gifts beneath the tree, I steeled myself for the gathering, aware that my presence was tolerated rather than celebrated. The dining room, with its chipped oak table and mismatched chairs, became the stage for a reckoning, where the family's disregard would collide with the truth of my accomplishments. Dinner commenced with Dylan at the helm, his voice booming as he unveiled his latest ambition, a tech startup poised, he claimed, to revolutionize e-commerce. We need $200. Zero to launch, it declared, his confidence unshaken by the vagueness of his plan. My father leaned forward, eyes alight with pride, while my mother nodded, her hand resting on Dylan's arm. We'll find a way, she assured. As relatives murmured their support, I sat at the table's far end, near the kitchen door, my plate dwarfed by the sprawl of holiday dishes. My contributions, a quiet question about market viability, were brushed aside, Dylan's laughter dismissing my expertise as irrelevant. The family's focus remained fixed on him. My presence, a mere footnote. As dessert was served, the gift exchange began, a ritual that exposed the depth of their neglect. Dylan and Mia unwrapped my offerings, a hand-stitched quilt, a sterling silver pen, eliciting perfunctory thanks before they turned to their pile of lavish presents. My parents received a carved jewelry box from me, their smiles fleeting. When the moment came for my gift, a whoosh fell. My mother's face contorted in exaggerated dismay. We forgot yours, she said, her tone almost theatrical. Dylan's laughter erupted, sharp and unrestrained. Same old story, he jeered. Don't sulk, you're not a kid anymore. The table joined in, their mirth a blade honed by years of indifference. Something within me shifted, not anger, but a crystalline clarity. I reached into my purse, my fingers closing around a brushed steel keychain. I'm not sulking, I said, my voice steady, rising above the din. I held the keys aloft, their gleam catching the candlelight. I bought myself a gift this year. My mother's brow furrowed. What's that, she asked. Keys, I replied, to my Brooklyn brownstone. I closed on it last month. Silence descended, heavy and abrupt. As if the room had lost its air, my father blinked, disoriented. You bought a house, he stammered. With what? With my earnings, I said, my tone measured. My firm licensed a cybersecurity framework I designed to a major bank. My bonus was $150. Nul after taxes. The words landed like a thunderclap. Dylan's jaw slackened. Mia's eyes widened. And my parents exchanged a glance of stunned disbelief. 150. Zero. My mother echoed, her voice pitching upward. What kind of job pays that? I met her gaze, I develop enterprise security systems for Fortune 500 clients. My salary has been six figures for years. The table remained frozen. The weight of my revelation reshaping their assumptions. The mood shifted with dizzying speed. My mother rose. Her smile sudden and saccharine. Why didn't you tell us? Sweetheart, we're so proud. My father chimed in, his voice eager. Dylan. Your sister works with top companies. Dylan's expression hardened, his wife whispering urgently in his ear. My aunt, sensing opportunity, leaned closer. That brownstone, how many bedrooms? 2. I replied. In Fort Greene, near my office. My mother's eyes gleamed. We must visit. Family stays close. The hypocrisy was palpable. Their warmth a thinly veiled calculation. As the evening wound down, my father approached, his tone deliberate. Before you go, we should discuss Dylan's venture. That $200? Oh, zero. It's a ground floor opportunity. With your income? It's negligible. Right, the audacity of their request. After years of dismissal, crystallized my purpose. I had come to Seattle, not to reconcile, but to lay bare the truth of my worth. As I retired to the couch, my makeshift bed, I knew the next day would demand a final stand. One that would sever the ties that had long bound me to their expectations.
How often have you walked into a room and immediately felt like you didn't belong? Like you were a guest in your own life, surrounded by people who never saw you? That was how I felt as I stood at the door of my father's house, watching Lily tug at my sleeve with the hopeful excitement only a 7-year-old could muster. She was ready for Christmas, prepared to meet the family she had only heard about in passing, and maybe, just maybe, finally felt what it was like to be part of a real family celebration. I wasn't so sure. I'd avoided this day for years. It wasn't that I didn't love Lily or that I didn't want her to have the kind of holiday I dreamed of giving her. It was just that the weight of the past seemed too heavy, too real. My family and I had drifted so far apart over the years that the ties between us felt more like a loose thread, easily pulled away. But when Lily asked about her grandpa a few weeks ago, something inside me shifted. "Mom, do I have a grandpa?" she'd asked, with those wide, curious eyes that still believed in magic. I couldn't bring myself to lie, so I said yes, and when she asked if we could visit him, I said yes again, against my better judgment. We drove in silence, the hum of the car's engine and the crunch of tires on snow the only sounds that filled the space between us. The house loomed ahead, cold and perfect. My father's house was always like that, impeccably clean, unnervingly pristine, with no room for imperfection. It was a museum, not a home. I felt the familiar weight settle over my chest as we parked, the old tension wrapping around my ribs like barbed wire, reminding me of everything that had been said, everything that had been left unsaid. Lily was already out of the car, her boots crunching in the snow as she skipped ahead, excited to see the people she had been told about in stories. I followed behind, trying to keep my composure, wishing I could shake the memories that clung to the edges of my thoughts. I hadn't been home for Christmas in 2 years, not since the divorce, not since everything in my life had cracked open, leaving me and Lily to rebuild on our own. The door swung open before I could even reach it, and my mother's smile was a thin line, polite but distant. She patted my head and offered a quick, mechanical hug. "Good to see you," she said, but there was no warmth in her voice, no real feeling. Lily, ever the optimist, tried to make a good impression, holding up a small drawing she had worked on for days. A picture of a Christmas tree with little colored lights, a wish for something warm and familiar. My mother patted her on the head like she was a child she barely recognized and barely cared about. Sandra, my sister, barely looked up from her phone as we walked in. She muttered a half-hearted hey before returning to whatever it was she was scrolling through. I felt it, that old, familiar sting of being invisible, a ghost in my own family's life. And then there was my father, sitting in his usual armchair by the fireplace, a whiskey glass in one hand, the TV remote in the other. He didn't stand up when we walked in, Didn't even offer a greeting, just a grunt. Didn't think you'd show up, he said, his voice clipped, as cold as the air outside. Lily, still hopeful and eager, waved her mittened hand. Hi, Grandpa, she said shyly, her voice soft, like she wasn't sure how to test the waters, how to see if this man, this stranger she had only heard about, might offer her the kind of warmth she had been promised. He grunted again, looking over at her with indifference, not even bothering to acknowledge her greeting. I was holding my breath, hoping maybe this time would be different. Maybe this time I'd be able to see my father soften. Maybe he'd look at Lily and see something worth loving. But no, nothing had changed. Not in him, not in them. The room was cold, but not just in temperature. It was that heavy kind of cold, the one that settles in your bones, making you wonder if things will ever be different. Lily kept trying, though, handing out little drawings to each of them, the ones she'd made with so much care. They were simple, innocent, folded little treasures with names written in blocky handwriting. She handed one to my mother first, then Sandra, then even my brother Matt, who hadn't spoken to anyone in ages. When she got to Frank, my father, she paused for just a moment. I saw it, that hesitation in her eyes. She didn't want to give him a reason to reject her, but she smiled and walked up to him, holding out the drawing. "Merry Christmas, Grandpa," she said, her voice trembling with quiet hope. Frank didn't even look up. He just held out his hand as if she were handing him a piece of junk mail. He took the envelope without a word, barely acknowledging her presence. Lily stepped back, smiling a little to herself, and sat next to me on the couch, her face still hopeful, as though she hadn't yet realized the coldness that surrounded us all. That's when I knew this was not going to be a normal Christmas. Not for me, not for Lily. I had brought her here, thinking that maybe this time would be different, that somehow my father would see her and finally love her as I had always hoped he would. Instead, she was just another disappointment to him, another reminder of all the things he couldn't accept, all the things he never forgave. And yet, Lily didn't back down. She didn't crumble in front of them. The tension in the room was thick, almost suffocating, but it was nothing compared to what was about to unfold. The sound of wrapping paper tearing was the only noise in the room. For a moment, it felt like the whole world had stopped, and the only thing that mattered was the small, hopeful girl sitting on the floor, carefully unwrapping her gift. Lily's fingers tugged at the corners of the paper, the movement slow and deliberate, as if she wanted to savor every second of the moment. She looked up at me once, her eyes wide with excitement, like she truly believed in the magic of Christmas. It was the kind of smile only a child can give, one that made you feel like maybe, just maybe, all the hurt and disappointment could be forgotten for a while. But as the paper came off and the box was revealed, I saw the change in her expression before she even said a word. Confusion first. Her tiny hands stopped moving, hovering over the box like maybe it was a trick, maybe there was something more hidden underneath. Then, the confusion deepened, and I saw something else. Hurt. The kind of hurt you can't hide, even if you try. Her shoulders stiffened and she glanced at me. My heart dropped in my chest. I knew. I knew before she even spoke that something had gone wrong. The box was empty. I blinked, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. Was it a mistake? Had something fallen out? Maybe someone forgot to pack it? But there was nothing. Just a plain cardboard bottom, no toy, no note, not even tissue paper, nothing. My hands trembled where they rested on my lap, and I could feel the heat rush to my face. I wanted to say something, anything. But the words got stuck in my throat, jagged and sharp, like splinters. And then I heard it. My father's laugh. It was short, sharp like a bark in the winter. The sound cut through the stillness of the room, and I could feel its weight settle around us like a fog. "Kids like her shouldn't expect anything," Frank sneered, folding his arms in the way he always did when he was about to say something cruel. "The world's got enough leeches already." I could feel my chest tighten, and my breath caught in my throat. Lily froze, her small hands still gripping the box, her fingers brushing the edges like she was searching for something that wasn't there. I saw the way she glanced up at me again, those big, soft eyes full of confusion. She didn't ask for help. She didn't ask for anything. She just looked at me like she was waiting to see if I would tell her to pretend it didn't hurt. But it did. It hurt so badly that I could barely stand to look at her. I hated myself at that moment. I hated that I had brought her here, that I had allowed myself to believe, even for a second, that maybe, just maybe, things would be different. Frank would see her, really see her, and recognize how beautiful, kind, and full of life she was. But he didn't. To him, she wasn't a little girl. She wasn't the precious child who deserved to be loved. She was just an extension of me, a painful reminder of everything he had lost and everything he couldn't forgive. The room fell silent, except for the soft hum of the heater in the background and the ticking of the old grandfather clock behind Frank's chair. Each second that passed seemed to echo louder than the last, like it was counting down to something neither of us was ready for. Lily's hands, still clutching the empty box, trembled. Her lips pressed tight, her chin quivering just enough that I knew she was holding back the tears. She wasn't crying yet, but I could see it in her eyes. The hurt was there, and it was deep, but she didn't cry. Not yet. I forced myself to look at her again, to look past the hurt in her eyes, to see the girl she was. She was 7 years old, and she had the kind of heart that shouldn't be broken, the kind of soul that should be free to laugh and love without the weight of other people's bitterness crushing her. But at that moment, she was learning something about the world that I had hoped she would never have to know. The world could be cold, people can be cruel, and sometimes, no matter how much you give, it will never be enough. Before I could say anything, Lily took a deep breath, like she was steeling herself for something. I could see it, that quiet determination in her face, that spark that told me she wasn't done yet. She wasn't going to let this break her. She wasn't going to let them win. "I got you a gift too, Grandpa," she said, her voice barely more than a whisper. The room froze. Frank looked up, his expression shifting from smugness to curiosity. "Oh yeah?" he said, barely masking the sarcasm in his voice. "This ought to be good." But Lily didn't back down. She didn't flinch. She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a small folded piece of paper. The kind of paper you fold so carefully, so tenderly, like it holds something important, something precious. She stepped forward, holding the paper out to him with both hands, her fingers trembling slightly. I could feel my heart in my throat. I knew something was coming. Something I wasn't ready for. But I also knew this moment wasn't over. Not by a long shot. And what Lily was about to do would change everything. The room was silent, all eyes on Lily as she stepped forward, holding that small, fragile piece of paper in both hands. It looked like it could be easily crumpled, dismissed with a single flick, but she held it with such care, as if it was the most important thing in the world. I could feel the tension in the air, thick and heavy like the room itself was holding its breath. I knew what was about to happen. I could see it in her eyes. The same quiet strength I'd seen in her before when the world seemed like too much for her to handle, but she still pushed forward. Lily was 7, but she had a resilience in her that I couldn't always understand. And now, in this room full of cold faces, in the face of everything that had been said and done to her, she was about to give something that no one expected. A gift, yes, but not just any gift. She held out the paper to Frank, standing there with a calmness I could barely comprehend. There was no hesitation in her movement, no second guessing, just a child offering a piece of herself, simple and pure, even in the face of cruelty. Frank's eyes flickered for a moment, narrowing as he looked at the paper. His expression didn't change, still the same cold, dismissive look he always wore, but his gaze lingered just a little longer than expected. He didn't reach out for it right away, as if unsure whether to take it or pretend it didn't exist. He had that way about him, as if nothing mattered, nothing ever would. And yet, Lily was undeterred. "I made this for you," she said softly, her voice quiet but steady. Frank didn't even sit up. He barely looked at her. He took the paper with one hand, still holding his whiskey in the other, his eyes flicking to the drawing only out of sheer obligation. He unfolded it slowly, just enough to get a glimpse of whatever it was, all while keeping his grip on his drink like it was the only thing that mattered. Lily stood there, waiting, watching him with those big, wide eyes. There was no pleading in them, no anger, just hope. It was the kind of look you could only find in a child who still believed that people could change, who still believed that love, even in the smallest doses, could break through the hardest of hearts. Frank's face didn't twist in irritation or confusion like I expected. His eyebrows didn't furrow like they usually did when he was angry. Instead, something shifted. I saw it in his eyes. A flicker. It wasn't much, just a brief moment where he stopped pretending that nothing mattered, where he stopped acting like he was the same man who had cast us all aside for so many years. The room held its breath. Sandra, who had been snickering under her breath just moments ago, was suddenly silent. My mother, who had been watching the exchange with a kind of detached curiosity, looked at Frank with a softness I hadn't seen in years. Even Matt, who had been the silent observer in the corner of the room, sat up a little straighter, his eyes flicking between Frank and Lily. No one knew what to say. Frank folded the paper carefully, almost reverently, and placed it on the side table next to his chair. The action was slow and deliberate. He didn't speak. He didn't slam the paper down like it was nothing. He placed it gently like it meant something, like he had seen something there, even if he couldn't fully understand it. For a moment, everything went quiet, not just in the room, but in my head. I wasn't sure what had just happened. It wasn't an apology, it wasn't a breakthrough, but it was something, a shift. A crack in the ice that had surrounded Frank for as long as I could remember. He stood up then, slowly, his movements deliberate. He didn't say a word to anyone. No one knew what to do. He didn't slam out of the room. He just walked away, his footsteps muffled on the old wooden floor. The sound of his retreat was the only noise that filled the room, and even that felt strange, like the weight of something unfinished was hanging in the air. Lily didn't look at me. She didn't look at anyone. She just stood there for a moment, still and quiet, her gaze fixed on the place where Frank had been sitting. There was no triumph in her eyes, no sense of victory. She wasn't looking for praise or recognition. She was just waiting. Finally, she moved. She walked back to the couch and sat down beside me, her small body curling in on itself, almost as if she was trying to hide from the weight of the world. But she didn't cry. She didn't break. She simply sat there quietly, her hands folded in her lap, as though she had done what she needed to do, what she knew was right. And me? I just sat there, watching her. I couldn't speak, couldn't move. I was overwhelmed with something I couldn't even name. Pride, maybe. Or maybe just awe at the strength my 7-year-old daughter had shown when I had been too afraid to face this moment myself. I hadn't expected this. I hadn't expected her to stand up for herself, for us, in the way that she had. I hadn't expected her to rise above the cruelty of my family and show them, with nothing more than a simple drawing, that she was stronger than any of them. But she had. And for the first time in a long while, I wasn't sure what to believe anymore. The silence lingered long after Frank had left the room. It was the kind of silence that pressed against your chest, suffocating and thick, as though the world itself was waiting for something to happen. I sat there, my hands in my lap, not sure what to do with myself. Not sure what to say to Lily, who was still sitting beside me, her body tense and her fingers fiddling with the hem of her coat. It wasn't that I expected her to break down. I didn't think she would cry. She wasn't that kind of girl. But I had hoped for something more. Something. I don't know what. Maybe an apology. Maybe a word of comfort from someone, anyone, who had witnessed what had just happened. But no one spoke. Not my mother, not Sandra, not even Matt. The room felt like it had been frozen in time, as though we were all trapped in this moment where nothing had been resolved and everything was still painfully unresolved. I glanced at Lily, trying to gauge what was going on in her head. But she didn't look at me. She didn't look at anyone. She just sat there, staring straight ahead, her eyes unfocused, as if she had already retreated into herself, away from the coldness of the world around her. It hurt to see her like that. hurt more than I wanted to admit. "Lily," I whispered, reaching over to touch her arm. She looked up at me, those big eyes still full of that quiet, steady strength. "You okay?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. She nodded, her voice soft and steady. "I'm okay, Mom," she said, as if it was the simplest thing in the world, as if this kind of thing didn't matter to her at all. But I knew it did. I knew it hurt, even if she didn't say it. I wanted to say more, to tell her that I was sorry for bringing her into this, for hoping that things could change. But the words didn't come. They stuck in my throat like stones, too heavy to lift. All I could do was sit there beside her, feeling like I had failed her in the worst possible way. And then, as if to add insult to injury, Sandra spoke up from across the room. "Well, that was something," she muttered, still half focused on her phone. "Can't believe you thought he'd change." I wanted to snap back, to tell her to shut up, but I didn't. I just looked down at the floor, my hands clenched into fists. Sandra's words were always like that, sharp and biting, meant to cut, meant to remind me of everything I had done wrong in my life. And at that moment, I could feel them all over again. Every mistake I'd ever made, every regret, every failure. But Lily didn't respond to Sandra. She didn't even flinch. Instead, she reached into her pocket, pulled out a small piece of ribbon from one of the other gifts she'd received, and began to twirl it around her fingers. She was quiet and thoughtful, as if nothing at all had happened. I envied her at that moment. Envy, pride, and something else I couldn't quite name. It wasn't until much later that day, after the dinner had passed in silence, after we'd gone through the motions of eating like a family that didn't know how to be one, that I realized something small. But it was there, under the surface, like a crack in a dam that hadn't burst yet, but would. Frank didn't come back into the living room for the rest of the evening, not after he had walked out, not even when dessert was served. There was no "Merry Christmas," no "Thank you for coming." There was just emptiness. His absence didn't feel like a victory, though. It didn't feel like anything. It just left the space even colder, more hollow than it had been before. I thought about Lily's drawing, the one she'd given him, the simple picture of him and my mother, holding hands, surrounded by little hearts. I didn't ask her about it. I didn't want to force her to explain something so personal, so raw. But I couldn't stop thinking about it. What had she meant by that? Was it just an innocent gesture? Or had she, even at her young age, known something that I hadn't? What was it about that drawing that had made Frank walk out of the room without a word? What had he seen that none of the rest of us had? I didn't get my answer that night. And I wouldn't get it the next day when we packed up to leave early. I told them we had plans in the city, and that was the truth, but it was also an excuse. I couldn't stay there another minute, pretending everything was fine when nothing had changed, when nothing would ever change. Sandra didn't even get up to say goodbye. My mother handed me a foil-covered plate of leftovers, as if that was all she could offer me. She didn't say anything about what had happened, not even a word to Lily. It was the last time I would see any of them for a while, and maybe, just maybe, I was okay with that. Lily didn't mention Frank again. She didn't ask why he hadn't come back, or if he was ever going to be different. She didn't need to. She was content in her quiet way, sitting by the window of the car as we drove home, staring out at the snow that blurred past the trees. I reached over and took her hand, and she squeezed it back, her fingers warm and steady in mine. We didn't talk. We didn't need to. We were okay. 4 days later, the package arrived. I found it on our doorstep one morning, lying there in the snow like something forgotten, unmarked and unassuming. At first, I didn't know what to make of it. It wasn't addressed to anyone in particular, just a small plain box with Lily's name written across the top in careful, blocky handwriting. It wasn't from Amazon. There was no return address and no indication of who had sent it. For a moment, I stood there staring at it, my fingers frozen around the edges of the package, not sure what to do. But Lily was already beside me, her eyes wide with curiosity, her breath puffing out in little clouds of steam as she bounced on her toes. "What's that, Mom?" she asked, her voice full of wonder, like she had just received a Christmas gift after all. I didn't know what to say, so I just shrugged, offering her a weak smile as I bent down to pick up the box. We went inside, and I set it down on the kitchen table, still unsure of what it could be. Lily didn't wait for permission. She was already pulling at the tape, peeling it off with the kind of urgency that only children know. It wasn't until the last piece of tape was pulled away that I noticed the small carving on the top of the box. It was old, worn from time, but unmistakable. Little roses, delicate and painted with such care that they looked like they could bloom again if you touched them. The music box was simple, but something about it felt like it belonged in another time, like it had lived through years and memories I could never touch. Lily opened the box with such reverence, her hands shaking just slightly. Inside, there was a tiny, hand-carved music box. The wood was smooth and aged but beautiful, with little roses painted around the edges of the lid. It was old-fashioned, the kind of thing you'd find in an antique store, tucked away on a dusty shelf. "I think it's for me," Lily whispered, her voice full of awe. She reached for the crank, her fingers trembling as she turned it. The soft, sweet notes of "Somewhere Over the Rainbow" filled the room, and for a moment, everything else fell away. It was like a breath of fresh air, like the first rays of sunlight after a long, bitter winter. For just a moment, the pain, the coldness, the distance, it all disappeared. Lily turned the crank again and again, the music filling the room with its hauntingly beautiful melody. She closed her eyes, letting the sound wash over her, her face softening in a way I hadn't seen in days. I stood in the doorway, watching her, and then, finally, I saw the note. It was simple, just one line, handwritten in a shaky, unfamiliar hand. "To the bravest girl I know. Thank you for remembering her." There was no signature, but I knew. I knew exactly who had sent it. It wasn't just a music box. It wasn't just some random gift. It was Frank's way of saying something he couldn't say with words, something he hadn't been able to express for years. I didn't know why it had taken him so long. I didn't know why he had waited until now to send it. But I didn't need to know. The gesture, small as it was, meant something. It meant he saw her. He saw Lily. He saw the gift she had given him, the one that had cracked his cold heart just enough to let a sliver of light in. At that moment, I felt something stir in me. It wasn't forgiveness, not exactly. It wasn't an apology from Frank, not really. But it was a beginning, a first step toward something that maybe, just maybe, could be repaired over time. Lily didn't speak for a long time. She just held the music box in her hands, listening to the song as it played over and over again. She didn't ask any questions. She didn't need to. She simply accepted it the same way she had accepted Frank's rejection without letting it break her. With quiet grace, she had changed something in him. Not enough, maybe, but enough to make a difference. Enough for him to remember something he had forgotten. I knelt beside her, my hands resting on her shoulders. "Lily," I whispered, "what did you draw for Grandpa?" Her eyes flickered up to mine, that soft, knowing look in them. She took a deep breath, letting the music play on as she finally answered. "It was a picture of him holding hands with Grandma," she said softly. "And me. I wanted him to smile again. I remember when he used to laugh." I swallowed hard, the lump in my throat growing with each word she spoke. I couldn't say anything for a moment. I just sat beside her, my arms wrapped around her as the music played softly in the background. And for the first time, I understood. I understood why she had done it. She hadn't given him a drawing to make him feel guilty. She hadn't done it to get anything in return. She had done it because she remembered the man Frank had been before grief had hardened him. She remembered the man who had smiled, who had laughed, and she wanted him to remember too. The music played on, gentle and haunting, and at that moment it felt like the world had shifted just slightly. Maybe not enough to change everything, but enough to open a door, just a crack. And sometimes that's all you need. The days passed quietly after the music box arrived. Life moved on, as it always does, with its ordinary rhythm: work, school, dinner, bedtime. But something had shifted, something subtle and almost imperceptible, like a thread being pulled tight before snapping into place. It wasn't just the music box, though that had been its own kind of miracle. It wasn't just the drawing or the gift that had been given and received. It was the understanding, the slow unraveling of all the things that had kept us locked in our pain. Lily didn't talk about Frank much after that. She didn't bring him up again, not once, even though I expected her to. I had thought maybe she would ask me why he had sent the music box. Maybe she would want to know what it meant. But she didn't. She simply tucked it into her nightstand, where it sat beside her little collection of treasures, and whenever she felt like it, she would wind it up and listen to the song. Sometimes she'd hum along with it, her soft voice filling the room, a quiet reminder of the kindness that still lived inside her, no matter what had happened. It was almost as if she knew something I didn't. She understood that the world didn't need to be perfect, that we didn't need to fix all the broken pieces at once. Sometimes, all you needed was to be brave. Sometimes, just showing up with love and honesty was enough to start the healing. Then, one afternoon, a letter arrived for me. It was small, unassuming, tucked between a few bills and an advertisement. I almost didn't open it at first. It was just one of those things, one of those insignificant moments that feel like nothing at all. But when I picked it up and saw the handwriting, I recognized it immediately. It was the same uneven, shaky handwriting I'd seen on the note with the music box. I opened it slowly, my heart beating faster than it should. Inside, there were just 3 lines written in a spidery, unfamiliar script. "I was wrong about you. She's a good kid. Hope you're doing okay." No signature, no further explanation, just those 3 lines. I stared at it for a long time, trying to process the words, trying to understand what they meant. Was it an apology? A moment of clarity from Frank? Was it a step toward something, or was it just the beginning of an impossible bridge that would never quite meet? It didn't matter. Not really. What mattered was that for the first time in years, Frank had seen me. He had seen Lily, and for whatever reason, in his way, he had acknowledged it. That was enough. It was all I needed. I sat down on the couch, the letter still in my hands, and thought about what had happened. About how much Lily had changed everything. How she had quietly, without ever realizing it, cracked through all the walls I had spent years building. She had given me the courage to face my family again. She had given me the hope that things didn't have to stay broken forever. I thought about Frank too. About the man he used to be, the man who had once smiled and laughed before grief and bitterness had frozen him in place. Maybe he wasn't going to change overnight. Maybe he wouldn't ever be the father I had hoped he would be. But in that small, unexpected way, in that quiet letter and the music box, I saw the first real sign that he wasn't beyond redemption. He wasn't beyond feeling. And for that, I was grateful. Lily came into the room, the sound of her footsteps light and steady, and climbed up beside me on the couch. She looked at the letter in my hands and, without saying a word, took it from me. She read it slowly, her brow furrowed as she processed the words. She looked up at me then, those big eyes full of quiet understanding. "You think he'll change?" she asked, her voice soft, almost too soft. I didn't have an answer for her right away. How could I? I didn't know. But I knew that change didn't always look the way we thought it would. Sometimes it wasn't a grand gesture, a big apology. Sometimes it was just a small, almost imperceptible shift, a crack in the ice, a glimpse of something better. "I don't know," I said finally, my voice steady despite the lump in my throat. "But I think he's starting to." Lily nodded, her little hand reaching up to squeeze mine. There was no more waiting, no more wondering if things would ever get better. There was just this moment, this quiet certainty that we would be okay. That, somehow, we had found a way forward, not by forcing things to change, but by showing up with kindness, with love, and with the courage to give even when it wasn't returned. The music box played softly in the background, a familiar melody now, one that had woven itself into the quiet fabric of our lives. And for the first time, I allowed myself to believe that maybe, just maybe, it was enough. Maybe it was enough to remind someone of who they used to be, even if that person could never find their way back on their own. Maybe it was enough to change the world, one small act of kindness at a time. As the music played on, I wrapped my arms around Lily, holding her close, knowing that no matter what happened, we had each other. And that, in the end, was more than enough. Through it all, I learned that love isn't about grand gestures or waiting for people to change. It's about showing up, even when it feels like you're walking into a storm. It's about offering kindness without expecting anything in return, even if it's met with silence or indifference. What Lily taught me is that the most profound acts of love are the quiet ones, the ones that don't demand attention, but instead create ripples that reach farther than we realize. And sometimes, that's enough. More than enough. It's the kind of love that doesn't need fixing. It just is.